My name is Lila Henderson, and I'm 29 years old. This whole story started with one phone call, the kind that flips your world like a pancake on a burning skillet. But to understand why that call mattered, you have to know the house I grew up in and the religion we practiced. Not church, though we went every Sunday. I mean the cult of the golden child. In my family, worship had a first name, Zachary. Ivy League law school. Wife from a tasteful sorority. 3-bedroom home in a gated community before he turned 28. Tesla that hummed like a secret. My mother said he drank a gentleman's bourbon. My father said he wore power suits. They never said the word perfect, but it dripped from every photo on their mantle like polish. And then there was me. I write code. I build the things you can't hold but also can't live without. Backends, APIs, the quiet heartbeat of a platform that doesn't crash at midnight. I went remote before it was cool. I ran a small team across 3 time zones. My apartment was modest, but mine. My time was my own. In my world, outcomes matter more than optics. In theirs, optics were everything. Lila, when will you stop playing on the computer and get serious? Mom liked to aim that one between the mashed potatoes and the after-church small talk. I would explain again that I was building web apps and automations, not Minesweeper. She'd do the nod, tight smile, pity in the eyes. You'll understand when you grow up. I was 26 when she said it last. I think she meant it. Dad didn't bother with pity. You can't build a legacy on a laptop, he'd tell me from the barstool throne of his HVAC company stories. Screens aren't real, sweat is real, wrenches are real. He'd rap his knuckles on the table as if truth lived inside the oak. The day everything cracked started out ordinary. Mom's birthday dinner at a restaurant with chandeliers shaped like upside-down snowdrops. Zach narrated his life like a press release. We're renovating the kitchen. Custom millwork, imported tile, he said, the word imported cruising around the table like a yacht. My parents beamed at him as if wisdom itself were speaking. I cleared my throat. One of my clients bumped my rate this week, I said. I finally get to retire the instant noodles. I made a joke to make it easy to clap for me. Nobody clapped. That's nice, sweetheart, Mom said. But what about your future? You're almost 27. Don't you want something real? Husband, kids, a home you can present? Present. Like a science fair project with glitter glue and a barcode. I could feel my boyfriend's hand squeeze mine under the table. Ethan, quiet and steady. He doesn't perform masculinity. He just inhabits it, calm as good weather. He started to speak, but I shook my head. This was my war. You mean something you can brag about at church, I said, smiling in a way that made my tongue taste like copper. The table tightened. Dad's fork kissed his plate hard enough to scratch it. Watch your mouth. No, really. I kept my voice soft. Zach upgrades a laundry room, and it's a national holiday. I deploy a platform with 10,000 users, and you act like I fixed your printer. Zach chuckled, the benevolent king amused by court jester. Sis, it's not real work. Half the time you don't even wear pants. Ethan inhaled like a wave hitting the shore. I put my napkin down. My hands were shaking, but my voice had learned a new trick. It didn't. If I'm such an embarrassment, I said, stop wasting your time on me. I stood and left. I thought, naively, that after a week someone would call. They didn't. The family group chat dimmed like a theater after the previews. When I did text, I got busy, or Zach stopping by, later. Silence arrived and then unpacked boxes, made a bed, and lived with us. 2 weeks later, Instagram told the truth in pixels. A carousel, party poppers, cake, my entire family clinking glasses at a restaurant with chandeliers that looked suspiciously familiar. Happy birthday to the woman who holds us all together, Zach's wife wrote. I zoomed in like a fool, looking for my elbow or the edge of my hair. I wasn't cropped out, I was never invited. That night, I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice poured through the speaker like cold water down my spine. Lila, we figured you were going through things. We didn't want to pressure you. To show up for your birthday? When you have something positive to share, something grounded, we'd love to hear from you again. Grounded, real, respectable. Words I'd come to know the way sailors know certain winds, the kind that look like breeze but capsize boats. I ran into Zach at a gas station a week later, aviators, Bluetooth bud, like he was closing a deal with Exxon while buying gum. Heard you sold the car, he said with a sympathetic frown that lived only on the surface. Making some changes, I said. If you need something real, we could use someone at the office. Phones, printing, little errands. Build your confidence back. There it was again, the family's favorite incense. Real. Real like paper in a tray. Real like my hands empty. I didn't hit him. I didn't shout. I smiled. Appreciate it, I said. I'm good. But I wasn't good. Not yet. Within a month, my life had shrunk to a single-room studio where the fridge door blocked the bathroom if you opened it too wide. The upstairs neighbor had a cat he argued with at 1 a.m. I worked from a thrift store desk that shook when I typed too fast. Dinner was noodles, rice, and the occasional burrito when a client paid on time. Hunger is a whetstone. It scrapes away what you can't use. Every day, I sat with my laptop, and something inside me clicked. I refactored old code bases like they were knots in a rope I had to untie to keep from falling. I rebuilt my proposals so they read like bridges, not guesses. I learned more in 6 months of quiet than in 3 years of credentials. And I let go of them. I unsubscribed from the group chat. I stopped measuring the week by whether mom called on Sunday. I put my head down and built. Ethan kept bringing me groceries I forgot at the store. Eggs, spinach, coffee. He didn't give speeches. He just stood with me when the ground got soft. Zach, liberated by my silence, rewrote the family newsletter. Lila's finally realizing that coding in pajamas isn't a career, he told an aunt who loved forwarding things. She'll be back in mom's guest room by Christmas. Funny thing about being underestimated, it gives you privacy. Privacy is where revolutions are born. The phone call that started this whole story came later. Months later, after I had already chosen to climb without an audience. But the fuse was lit that night at the Snowdrop Chandelier when I understood that I could keep auditioning for a part I wasn't meant to play. Or I could write a different show. I chose the latter. Somewhere on the other side of this, I would become someone my parents called respectable. But not because I changed my work, because I stopped changing me. And when the world finally noticed, they would show up with cameras and cookies and speeches about family. They would ask me to smile for photos meant to prove I had always belonged. By then I would own my seat. But first came the fall, and then the build. And then finally the call. The week after I left the Snowdrop Chandeliers behind, the universe dangled a miracle like a key on a string. Subject line, full stack overhaul plus retainer. An American startup I'd admired from afar wanted everything. UI refresh, API rebuild, cloud deployment, the bones in the skin. The money made my throat go dry, commas where I'd only seen zeros before. I reread it 3 times, paced my studio, then called Ethan. Say yes, he said softly, as if the word might scare the moment away. We'll make it fit. We. The smallest, most expensive word in my life. I said yes. I signed. I let myself dream out loud for the first time in months. I rented a desk in a co-working space with brick walls and potted plants that all had names on tiny chalkboard stakes. Fernanda, Cloris, Hank. I took photos of the badge like a child with a new backpack. I mapped the sprint in neat blocks. Discovery, wireframes, back-end scaffolding, auth hardening, deploy. I hired a part-time designer I'd worked with before. I ordered a second monitor, the kind that made code look like a city lit at night. For 1 week, I lived inside Momentum. I built a demo so clean it gleamed. I slept 4 hours and felt rich. Then the email came. Not from my contact, from a lawyer. Due to ongoing litigation and an emergency freeze of assets, all payments and contractor agreements are suspended until further notice. The rest was legal snow, dense, cold, unkind. I stared at the screen until the words unhooked from meaning. The office hummed around me, someone's espresso shot hissing like a steam valve, a sales call about Q4 targets, a laugh I wanted to borrow. I copied the email into notes, just to watch the text appear somewhere else like moving it might dilute its poison. Bad? Ethan asked over the phone. Catastrophic, I said, and the word made me dizzy. He offered to drive over. I said no. He came anyway. We sat on the cement stairwell behind the building with paper cups of coffee that tasted like rain. I explained everything, hands moving in the air like I could diagram an escape. He didn't make promises or schedules. He listened. When I finished tearing through possibilities, bridge loans, short-term gigs, calling in old favors, he finally spoke. You'll land, he said. You always do. I've never landed from this high, I said. You jumped higher, too. The co-working lease was a month-to-month mercy. I canceled it. Boxed my monitor with the care of a nurse, wrote Fragile Hope on the cardboard, because sometimes sarcasm keeps you from crying in lobbies. I posted the car. 2 days later, it drove away with someone else's hands on the wheel. I folded the money into 4 piles: rent, groceries, Wi-Fi, the tiniest sliver for taxes. The studio swallowed me whole again, fridge door blocking the bathroom, upstairs cat starting another midnight debate. I didn't tell my parents about the collapse. I had learned my lesson at the snowdrop chandeliers. Give them a small truth and they decorate it into a parade against you. Zach didn't need my words. He got the scent of blood and wrote the new hymn. Lila's finally seeing that coding in pajamas isn't a career, he told an aunt who loved speakerphone. I told her, come answer phones for me while she gets back on track. The story spread the way mold does, in the dark, with just enough moisture to thrive. Mom stopped her Sunday calls. Dad sent me a link to an article titled, "Trades Are the Backbone of America." No note, just the headline like a sermon he'd been waiting to preach. I put my phone face down and went back to my thrift store desk. The legs wobbled, so did I. Hunger is not only the groan in your stomach, it's the way days stop being dates and become math. How many hours to complete this fix? How many hours until the rent is due? How many cups of noodles until the invoice clears? I scheduled my fear-like meetings. 10 o'clock to 10:15, worry about everything. 10:15, push code. Ethan kept showing up with small mercies. Eggs, spinach, beans, the good rice. He never asked for gratitude, only presents. Sometimes, when the ceiling leaked its city noises and the neighbor's cat announced another grievance, he'd read me a paragraph from the book on his nightstand. The words were always about mountains, or water, or stubborn things that survive winter. There was one complication I hadn't budgeted for. Maya, his ex-girlfriend. We were the kind of adults who knew our pasts had names, faces, receipts. I didn't mind the ghost of a history until it knocked on the door. She called the night I boxed my monitor. "Hey, stranger," she said, bright as a new dime. "Saw a photo of you near Riverside. Are you living over there now?" Ethan's reply was measured. "I am. What's up, Maya?" "Just checking in. We should catch up. Coffee? I could ask Lila to come. Girls' night." I could hear the aim through the smile. Friendly, harmless, still too practiced. "That's kind," he said, "but no, take care." When he told me later, he watched my face like a doctor reading a pulse. I shrugged and told the truth. She's allowed to exist. So am I. He kissed my forehead like the period at the end of a sentence. The topic didn't come up again, but I wrote it down in the margins of my mind, the place where I keep weather forecasts and old promises. Not a threat, just a forecast. There may be rain on a day you need sun. I made a list of the code bases I could fix fast for cash. Bug hunts, security patches, small refactors. I emailed 5 former clients, the careful kind that read their contracts and paid what they owed. 3 wrote back within hours. 1 apologized for not having budget this quarter. 1 said, "Circle back next month." The 3rd offered a small job with an insulting rate that came wrapped in condescension. "I'm sure this will help you get back on your feet." I didn't fall, I wrote, then deleted it. I accepted the work. Pride doesn't pay, Con Ed. Days became long strings of small wins. Shave 600 milliseconds off a response time. Catch a race condition in staging. Write documentation so clear even my father would call it real. Nights became a different string. Emails to myself with subject lines like, "Notes for sane Leela," and "Remember, you're good at this." I learned that pep talks sound ridiculous until they work. The family group chat pulsed to life exactly once in those weeks. A photo of Zach behind a podium at a legal conference. Mom wrote, "So proud of our son." Dad chimed in with a flexing arm emoji, a digital bicep he'd never lifted for me. I hovered over the heart reaction, then put the phone down. I was done clapping for people who preferred me invisible. One night, after a 14-hour sprint to untangle someone's API authentication, I stood at the window, forehead against glass that smelled faintly of old rain. The streetlight turned everything a faded gold. I watched 2 kids skate past the corner store, laughter bouncing off the brick like coins. My reflection looked like a girl paused mid-sentence. I thought of the dinner with the snowdrops and the word real echoing from every mouth that said it. I whispered to the glass, "If this isn't real, why am I so tired?" My laptop pinged. An email slid into my inbox like a note under a dorm room door. From Drew, remember me? Subject, that order tracker you built. I didn't open it. Not yet. That's part 3. That's the door out of this hallway. Before that door, there was one more test. I woke to a voicemail from my mother. Hi, sweetheart, she said, sweet as tea with too much sugar. We miss you. Zach's stopping by tonight. Why don't you come for dinner? It would be good to share what you've learned, in the real world. There it was, hung like laundry between the words. The real world. Their world. A place where success wore suits and photographed well. I stared at the ceiling. The upstairs cat meowed like a cranky alarm clock. I texted exactly 5 words back. Thanks, can't make it, busy. I was busy. Busy surviving. Busy not auditioning. Busy building a runway no one else could take credit for. The next afternoon, I took the long way home, the route that passes the river. The water moved like it had somewhere to be. A pair of geese cut a path, arrogant as CEOs. I stood there and said the vow out loud, a contract with the only partner I could guarantee, myself. No more asking to be seen by people who choose not to look. The wind didn't clap, the sky didn't part, but something inside me exhaled. And when I got back to the studio, the email from Drew was still waiting, patient as a chance. I clicked it open. The subject line read, "That order tracker you built still works." I stared at the message for a full minute, rereading it until the words blurred. Drew had been one of my first freelance clients, a small-time e-commerce guy with more enthusiasm than budget. I'd built him a basic order tracking system a year ago when my rent was overdue, and I'd barely charged him enough to cover groceries. Now he was back. "Hey Lila," he wrote, "we're growing like crazy. You open to helping with something bigger?" For a second, I didn't believe it was real. Then I whispered to myself, "Bigger sounds nice." I typed back, "Sure, what's up?" He replied within the hour. His small apparel line had gone viral after a celebrity shout-out, and he was drowning in logistics chaos. He needed custom tools for tracking, loyalty points, fulfillment, the whole ecosystem. When I saw the proposed budget, I laughed out loud. It was more than my last 3 gigs combined. I didn't dance. I didn't scream. I just leaned back, breathed through the electric panic, and said, "Let's begin." For the first time in months, my fridge had more than condiments and regret. I bought eggs, butter, and a loaf of bread that didn't say discount on the label. Ethan noticed the quiet changes. Groceries stacked neatly, me humming while compiling code, a candle burning at night instead of my laptop's glow. "Feels lighter in here," he said one evening. "Maybe it's the bread," I joked. He smiled, but his eyes said he knew better. 2 weeks later, I delivered the first version of Drew's system. He wired the remaining payment instantly. Then, 15 minutes later, another email arrived. "You over-delivered, sending a bonus. Also, gonna post about you. Hope that's cool?" A bonus. I stared at the word like it was written in another language. The only thing more shocking than being underpaid is being fairly paid with gratitude on top. When Drew's post went live, my name was tagged alongside phrases like insanely efficient, responsive, and total lifesaver. By morning, I had 3 new messages in my inbox. By the end of the week, 7. For the first time, people wanted me not for favors, but for results. I set boundaries fast, clear contracts, upfront payments, no family and friends discounts. I reinvested every dollar back into my setup. New equipment, accounting software, and a small reserve in a business account under a name that finally made me proud, LH Systems. I registered it as an LLC, just to remind myself that I was building something that couldn't be erased with a shrug. And most importantly, I stopped telling my family anything. Not because I was hiding, because I had finally learned I didn't owe them updates, explanations, or proof of worth. They didn't get to decide which version of me deserved applause. 3 months after Drew's project went live, my life looked different. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I had clients who respected contracts, a sleep schedule that didn't depend on panic, a boyfriend who believed in quiet victories. Then came the message that would rewrite the map again. A founder named Adrian Blake, someone I'd followed on LinkedIn for years, reached out. He ran a logistics startup that had traction, funding, and a clear hole in its tech leadership. "Referral from Drew," the email said. "Need a CTO." For 5 minutes, I thought it was a scam. Then I saw the company signature. Legitimate, verified, registered. We met for coffee at a small cafe downtown. Adrian was direct, curious, and brutally honest about what they needed. Scalability, UI refinement, and someone who could lead a dev team without hiding behind jargon. We talked for 3 hours. When I left, I had a handshake, a modest salary, a small equity slice, and something I hadn't had in years: purpose. Ethan hugged me that night, arms around my shoulders like a promise. "Told you you'd land," he said. "I didn't land," I whispered. "I built the ground." The next 5 months were a blur. We coded, designed, tested, failed, and fixed. I survived on coffee, adrenaline, and playlists full of rain sounds. I was so tired I once tried to microwave my phone, but when our platform finally launched, it worked. Users signed up faster than expected. Investors noticed. Local journalists wrote features about the two innovators redefining logistics from a cafe basement. Then one Thursday afternoon, my phone started buzzing nonstop. An article had dropped. Title: How Two Developers Rebuilt Logistics from a Living Room. Subtitle: Meet the Brains Behind Swiftline. Adrian Blake and CTO Lila Henderson. There it was, my face, my quote, my story, edited for charm but still mine. I stopped waiting for permission. I just started building. The line I'd said half asleep during the interview was now printed in bold, sitting under my photo. Within hours, my notifications exploded. LinkedIn messages, old classmates, recruiters, even random cousins I hadn't heard from in years. But one notification froze me in place. Mom, followed by Dad, then Zach, then the family group chat that had been a ghost town for over a year suddenly sprang to life. Zach: Pretty cool article, sis. Mom: We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Always knew you had potential. Dad: That's the hustle we like to see. Always knew. The words tasted like dust. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because for the first time, I saw the pattern for what it was. When I was silent, they ignored me. When I succeeded, they applauded, because now they could be proud without being uncomfortable. But this victory wasn't theirs to share. Ethan came home to find me sitting on the floor, laptop open, screen filled with unread messages. "You gonna answer them?" he asked gently. "No," I said. "I already did years ago. They just weren't listening then." He smiled, slid beside me, and handed me a cup of tea, then drank to the quiet. I did. And that night, when I looked out the window of my tiny apartment, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt real. Not their version of real, mine. What I didn't know was that the article was only the first domino. Because success doesn't just open doors, it calls ghosts back through them. The next morning, Mom called again, then Dad, then Zach, then the family dinner invitation. No context, just, "We'd love to see you this weekend." I closed my eyes and laughed. Here it comes, I thought. Round 2. It started with that simple text from my mother. "We'd love to see you this weekend." No apology, no explanation, just an invitation dropped like bait on a shiny hook. I stared at the message for a long minute, thumb hovering over reply. I could already picture it. The small talk disguised as affection, the compliments sharpened like knives, the inevitable, "We're so proud now that you're doing something real." Ethan saw the look on my face and asked, "Family?" "Yeah," I said, letting out a small laugh. "They must have finally noticed the internet exists." He didn't tell me what to do, he just said, "You don't owe them attendance." So I didn't go. 2 days later, Mom called again. Her voice was all honey. "Sweetheart, your father and I have been talking. Maybe we were a bit critical before, but now that you're working on something respectable." "Respectable?" I interrupted. "Mom, you once said I was wasting my 20s on fantasy." She laughed as if it were a fond memory. "Well, people change. We're proud of you now, truly. You've made something real." There it was again. Real. That word followed me like a ghost with a new mask. She wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because now I could be shown off. I ended the call politely. "Thanks, Mom. I'm really busy right now." And I was. Busy scaling something that finally mattered. Busy leading a team that respected me. Busy building the life they never believed I could. The next few weeks felt like a movie in fast forward. Our startup's user base doubled. A local business journal featured us. Then a TV segment request came in, a human interest piece about women in tech. The producer said, "You're the kind of story we love. Resilience, reinvention, results." We filmed in our office, a converted loft above a cafe that smelled like espresso and ambition. I wore my old hoodie, the one I'd coded in through every low point. They wanted to dress me up. I refused. When the segment aired, I almost didn't watch. But Ethan turned it on, grinning like it was the Oscars. The headline flashed. "From ramen to real, how Lila Henderson is redefining logistics tech." I should have been thrilled, and I was for about 12 hours. Then my phone rang again. "Dad." "Hey, saw you on TV," he said, his tone suddenly warm, familiar, like we hadn't spent years speaking through silence. "Didn't realize how far you'd come. We're proud of you, kiddo." Kiddo. He hadn't used that word since I was 16. "The segment looked great," he continued. "Your mom and I were thinking, it's time to reconnect. Maybe a family dinner, just us. Zach will be there, of course." I could hear the careful phrasing. It wasn't an invitation, it was a presentation. He added, "You could share a few things about your company. It'd be good for the family, maybe even mutually beneficial." Mutually beneficial. Translation, make us look good again. I said I'd think about it. Then I hung up and didn't. Instead, I called my co-founder Adrian. "Let's host our own dinner," I said. "For the team, a real one." We booked the top floor of the cafe downstairs. We ordered catering, soft lights, music that hummed instead of shouted. Everyone showed up, our designers, developers, even the intern who once cried over a failed deployment. I gave a small toast, voice trembling with something that wasn't fear anymore. "To all the people who didn't need me to be perfect to see me as capable," I said. The room clapped, laughed, cheered. For once, the sound didn't sting, it filled. Someone snapped a photo of us mid-laughter, the skyline glowing behind us. I wasn't even in the center of the frame, just another face in a room full of equals. That photo went online the next morning, the caption, "From ramen to real, so proud of what we're building together." It wasn't viral, but it traveled, fast. By noon, local founders reshared it. A small startup blog picked it up, and then, predictably, the family saw it. Zach texted first. "So you're doing parties now. Nice to know you've got time for that." Then Mom. "Would have been nice to be included. We're still your family." Dad just sent a thumbs-up emoji linked to the article. Classic. It wasn't about the party. It was about control. For years, they'd curated every family photo, every moment of celebration. Now I was the one curating, and they weren't on the list. They couldn't stand it. A week later, another message landed in my inbox, this time from Zach. "Hey, heads up, there's a big business leadership event next month. Mom and Dad are planning to go. You should come too. It'd be a great way to show unity, for the family brand." The family brand. As if we were a corporation and I was the rogue employee threatening the logo. I didn't reply. He called that evening. I let it ring out once, twice. Then curiosity won. I answered. "You've made your point, okay?" he said, voice sharp. "You've proved yourself. Congrats. But dragging it out like this, it's not a good look." "For who?" I asked quietly. "For all of us. People talk. It doesn't look good when one of us is out there acting like they made it alone." "I did make it alone," I said. "Come on, Lila. Don't be like that." "Like what? Honest?" Silence. Then a sigh that sounded like surrender and pride wrestling in his throat. "Just think about it," he said and hung up. 3 days later, I looked up from my laptop to see a familiar figure standing at my office door. My mother. She was holding a tin of cookies. "Thought I'd stop by," she said, smiling too widely. "Saw your name on the building directory. Figured you wouldn't mind." Mind? Only the woman who once said, "Maybe some tough love will make her grow up," now sitting on my office couch as if we met for brunch every week. She looked around wide-eyed. "This is impressive, really impressive." I nodded once. "We like it." She placed the cookies on my desk like a peace offering from a kingdom I'd already left. "I just want to talk," she said. "No judgment, no guilt trips, I swear." "Okay," I said, crossing my arms. "Talk!" She hesitated, then looked me straight in the eyes. "We made mistakes. That was new? But we're still your parents," she added quickly. "And it would mean a lot if you came back into the fold. Be part of the family again." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I never left. You just stopped counting me." She blinked, the first crack in her perfect calm. "You want me at dinners? In the group chat? Fine, but I'm not coming back to be the failure mascot." "Lila." "No. You don't get to rewrite the story now that it's convenient. You ignored me when I needed help. You dismissed me when I asked for support. You only showed up when cameras did." She swallowed, eyes glistening. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. The silence between us felt final, not cruel, just real. When she finally stood, she left the cookie tin behind. I didn't move it for hours. Because that's the thing about boundaries. They don't always feel like victory. Sometimes they just feel quiet. But quiet is how healing starts. She didn't call again, not that week, not the next. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. And yet something in me knew. Peace in this family never lasted long. Because where apologies failed, manipulation always found a way. And the next message waiting for me would prove it. 2 weeks after my mother's surprise office visit, the quiet began to hum again. The kind of silence that meant a storm was gathering just off stage. When my phone buzzed one Friday morning, I didn't expect it to be from Dad. Lunch? Our treat. Just want to talk. Neutral place. Neutral. The word felt rehearsed, like something he'd picked up from a podcast about conflict resolution. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted to see what story they were telling themselves this time. I arrived 10 minutes early at the cafe they'd chosen, one of those trendy places that pretends to be humble with its reclaimed wood tables and overpriced tea. I sat by the window, ordered a black coffee, and watched raindrops race each other down the glass. Then they walked in. Mom in pearls, Dad in a blazer that still had the store tag peeking from the cuff, and Zach, looking like a man who hadn't slept since Pride went out of style. "Lila," Mom said, her smile all performance, "you look wonderful." "Thanks," I said evenly. They sat. Zach cleared his throat. "We'll get right to it." "Oh, of course you will," Dad began, tone brisk and businesslike. "Now that you're established," he said, "we've been thinking about how to reintroduce you publicly to the family circle." "Reintroduce?" I echoed, setting my cup down. Zach leaned in. "There's been a lot of buzz lately. About your company, about you. It's a chance for all of us to show unity. The Hendersons, thriving in different industries. Legal, business, tech, a family legacy." Ah, there it was, the pitch. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a PR asset. Mom nodded quickly. "People love a comeback story, sweetheart. We can do a joint interview, maybe even a photo spread. Imagine the headline, 'The Hendersons Building Together.'" I stared at them for a long time. Then I laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just tired. "You want a headline?" I said softly. "Try this one. Family ignores daughter until she's useful again." Mom's smile faltered. Dad frowned. "Lila, that's uncalled for." "No," I said calmly. "What's uncalled for is pretending we're a team now. You cut me off when I was down. You watched me struggle and called it tough love. And now that there are cameras, you want me back in the family photo." Zach's jaw clenched. "Look, I get it. You're angry." "I'm not," I interrupted. Anger assumes I still expect better. For a moment, no one spoke. The rain outside softened, like it was listening. Then I stood, slid a 20 under my untouched plate, and said, "I'm not interested in being a redemption story you can monetize." "Lila," Dad started, voice tight. "You're not proud of me," I said, turning toward the door. "You're proud of what my success says about you. There's a difference." And then I walked out. No yelling, no tears, just quiet clarity. That evening when I got home, Ethan was sitting at the counter, half asleep over his laptop. I dropped my bag and exhaled. "Was it as bad as you thought?" he asked. "Worse," I said. "They came with a pitch deck disguised as family." He smirked sadly. "You didn't buy it." "Not even the free lunch." He stood, kissed my forehead, and said, "Then you finally graduated." I smiled. "From what?" "From their approval." I didn't realize how true that was until later. A few days passed. The silence returned. I thought maybe they'd finally retreat to the comfort of denial. Then came the letter. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten letter in my mother's careful, looping script. The same handwriting that used to label my lunchboxes when I was 7. I read it standing up, heart tight in my chest. "Dear Lila, we never realized how much our words hurt until we saw who you've become without us. It wasn't our intention to make you feel less than. We just wanted what was best for you. Maybe one day you'll understand we were trying our best with what we knew. No apology, no ownership, just soft regret wrapped in self-preservation." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my desk, next to my first rejected job offer, a tax form from the year I almost gave up freelancing, and the photo of my leaky first apartment ceiling, my museum of no one believed in me. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because I didn't need her to understand anymore. The same week, Swiftline, our company, closed a deal that would change everything. A logistics giant offered a partnership that would triple our reach. When the press release went out, my name wasn't in the headline this time. It didn't need to be. It was there, quietly, beneath the team photo, beside the title I'd earned the hard way, Chief Technology Officer. That night, as the emails of congratulations flooded in, I got a text from Dad. "We need to talk about the family and our future." I read it 3 times, then I understood. They weren't proud. They were panicking. For years, they'd backed the wrong horse. They'd poured everything into Zach, the golden boy with the resume, the suits, the speeches. But Zach was still middle management, still talking more than building. And me, I was the disappointment daughter who had built something that couldn't be ignored. The irony was poetic. But the next thing they would try, that would show me just how desperate they'd become. Because when people lose control of the story, they don't apologize, they rewrite it, and I was about to watch them try. A week after Dad's cryptic text, "We need to talk about the family and our future," the air around me changed. The silence wasn't calm anymore. It was charged, like static before lightning. I knew something was coming, I just didn't know from which direction. It arrived at midnight, a voice note from Zach. "Look, I don't want us to be enemies," his voice said, tired and defensive. I was a jerk. I get it. I was cocky. "But you've made it now, Lila. Isn't that enough? Can't we move on and build something together? A real family legacy?" There it was again. Legacy. Their favorite word. Their favorite leash. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I had finally learned closure doesn't come from conversations with people who never listen. I turned off my phone, went to the window, and watched the city shimmer below, the skyline like a pulse I finally matched. They'd ignore me until they couldn't, and now that they couldn't, they wanted credit. But some things aren't for sale, not even peace. 3 weeks later, Swiftline was invited to a local business panel on innovation and resilience, the kind of event where everyone wears name tags and pretends the free coffee tastes good. I stood in front of 50 people, hands steady for once. When someone asked, "What would you tell your younger self, the one who was struggling?" I paused, thought of the noodles, the empty group chats, the chandelier dinner that started it all. Then I said, "They'll ignore you until they can't. Stop trying to be heard by people who've already decided to be deaf." The room went silent. Then one person clapped, then another. The applause grew. Not wild, not performative, real. The kind that doesn't echo, it settles in your chest. Afterward, Ethan found me backstage. "You realize," he said, smiling, "that was the perfect ending line to your story." I smiled back. "No, it's just the ending of their chapter." The months that followed were a blur of growth. We scaled, we hired. We moved into a bigger office with real windows and walls that didn't echo. I started hiring people like me, the ones written off, underestimated, told they weren't real enough. One of them was a single mom learning to code at night. Another was a kid who'd been fired for being too quiet. Quiet doesn't mean weak, it means focused. We built something stronger than approval. We built belonging. Then one afternoon, the past knocked again. Literally. When I opened the office door, I expected a delivery. Instead, there stood Maya, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. Perfect posture, designer coat, smile rehearsed. "Lila! Wow, you're doing amazing," she said, stepping just close enough to make it awkward. "I saw the article about Swiftline. Incredible work." "Thanks," I said carefully. "How did you find the office?" She laughed lightly. "Oh, it's public record now. I wanted to reach out, maybe discuss a potential collaboration. I'm consulting for a new startup. Logistics meets fashion. You'd be perfect." Her tone dripped with honey and calculation. The kind of offer that isn't really about business. It's about visibility, access, ego. Ethan, who happened to be walking in behind her, froze. "Maya," he said, voice polite but flat, "what are you doing here?" She gestured vaguely toward me, just connecting dots. I smiled, the same way I had at the snowdrop chandelier that night long ago. Calm, precise. "Thank you," I said. "But I'm not interested in any collaboration tied to my personal life. Professional boundaries matter here." Her smile faltered. "Of course, just thought—" "I know," I said, "but some bridges are better admired from a distance." She left. Ethan exhaled a laugh that was half relief, half disbelief. "You handled that like a CEO." I shrugged. "Turns out I am one." We both laughed softly. That evening, when the office emptied and the lights dimmed, I stood by the window and looked at our glowing logo reflected on the glass. Swiftline. Under it, the plaque with our names. Adrian Blake, founder. Lila Henderson, co-founder and CTO. The letters gleamed faintly, catching the last orange light of the setting sun. I thought of my parents' last text, of Zach's voice message still unopened, of the cookies still sitting, stale and untouched, in the office drawer. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Not to justify my path, not to prove my worth, not to apologize for the space I took up. Because peace, I realized, isn't granted by forgiveness, it's earned by freedom. A month later, my company hosted a staff Q&A for a visiting business school class. Someone asked, "What's your proudest moment so far?" I didn't mention the TV interviews, the funding rounds, or the magazine covers. I said, the first day I didn't check my phone to see if my parents had called. The students laughed softly, not mockingly, knowingly. I added, sometimes success isn't about climbing higher. It's about walking away from the wrong mountain. They applauded. I smiled. That night, I walked home with Ethan. We passed the same cafe where I once wrote code between bites of cold noodles. He said, do you ever think about calling them again? Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember, I don't miss them. I miss who I wanted them to be. He nodded. That's fair. I reached for his hand. Fairness is all I ever wanted. And for once, I finally had it. No revenge, no grand finale, just peace. Earned, quiet, complete. As we crossed the street, a bus rolled by. On its side was an ad for Swiftline with the tagline we'd chosen together. Built on connection, powered by integrity. I smiled, because those weren't just words. They were the life I built from scratch. Proof that you can grow even in the soil that tried to bury you. And as the city lights flickered around me, I whispered to myself, they'll ignore you until they can't. Then I smiled wider, walking forward into the night, no longer seeking permission, only peace.